Contact bearing 230 Angels unknown. A 19-year-old radar man aboard USS Hornet says it flat while the Pacific is pitch black, and halyards beat the mast like drums. Topside lookouts see nothing. Below decks a humming SC set, and the carrier's fighter direction team already sketch the raid's curve in grease pencil. Steady, Mark. The kid repeats, and the bridge answers with a turn into the wind that buys seconds nobody can see. Seconds mean wildcats at the right height. 5-inch divided by 38 directors set, Oerlikons manned, and pilots briefed before the first engine whine breaks cloud. Japanese crews trained to use darkness like a cloak. We trained to erase the cloak. CXAM and SC air search radars, stacked with disciplined radio calls, make the night predictable, almost polite. Vector 320, Angels 1 to 5, the controller says. And a pair of F4 Wildcats, folding wings still wet from spray, slide toward a sound only their headsets carry. The kid at the scope never sees a wing or tail, just trace, range, speed, and yet his voice moves a 20,000-ton city into survival. There is nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer, Doolittle said months earlier. Down here that heart beats in headsets and pencils, not medals. The Japanese think darkness is theirs, then run into fighters arriving from the one quadrant they didn't guard. What looks like luck is a system. Radar to radio, radio to cockpit, cockpit to gunnery. Each piece drilled so a teenager's calm becomes fleet doctrine. The first bomb misses by yards because the ship began to turn 30 seconds sooner, and 30 seconds came from a green echo and a voice you could mistake for your kid brother. A signalman grips the rail and hears the flat top breathe as turbines answer the bell. A gun captain feels fuse time tick perfectly with the approach he cannot see. On the scope, the smear splits two groups now, and the controller changes the dance without raising his voice. Angels, 1 to 2, now cut to 3, 1-0, he says. And the Wildcats pivot as if the sky had hinges. A young seaman chalks a new plot and tastes metal in the air, a mix of coffee, cordite, and fear, then steadies his hand. He is nobody famous. He is America at work. When the enemy asks, "How did they find us at night?" The honest answer is simple. We taught ordinary people to do extraordinary tasks and trusted them with the switch. The echo fades. The vectors hold. The deck crew chocks the next fighter, and the arresting gear crew resets as if this were any Tuesday. Tomorrow's paper will praise heroism. Tonight the victory is quieter, electric, practiced, and ours. 16B, 25B, Mitchell's twin right, R2000, 600 seconds, 67-foot wings, the glassed-in nose like a hawk's beak roll onto Hornet's deck at Alameda in April 1942, while cold bay wind snaps lines and sailors grin like conspirators. Captain Mark A. Mitcher walks the chalked wheels. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Doolittle taps shoulders, checks straps, and climbs into the lead ship. On 18 April, roughly 650 nautical miles from Japan, after the picket boat Nito Maru is sighted and sunk, the order comes. Launch now. Each Mitchell shudders, sinks, then lifts tires chattering off the bow as deck crews hold breath. Eyes watering from spray and exhaust. There is nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer, Doolittle will say. But that day the line is muscle and math. Throttle, flap, gust. Tokyo, Nagoya, Kobe feel American engines for the first time. Bombs are light, shock is heavy. Radios in Tokyo crackle with disbelief because geography has failed. 15 crews aim for China. 1 diverts to the Soviet Far East and is interned. 3 airmen are killed during the mission. 8 captured. 3 executed. 1 dies in captivity. The rest scatter across mountains and rice paddies until rescue. The lesson outgrows the tonnage. America will do what physics says is barely possible and make it routine by afternoon. The same deck crews who walked wingtip to wingtip with army pilots carry that culture below the island to the Combat Information Center. If a carrier can launch land bombers into headwinds, it can bolt new eyes to the mast and teach 19-year-olds to vector fighters at night. Inter-service trust becomes muscle memory. Precision timing becomes intercept geometry. Calm under pressure becomes a headset cadence you would follow into a storm. A machinist's mate remembers chalk marks from B-25 tires still ghosting the planks weeks later, a quiet signature under the scuffs of wildcats. The Japanese high command sees more than smoke. It sees American intent, elastic, creative, and dangerous to empires. Back home, factories answer with parts and planes. Willow Run will push a B-24 every 63 minutes. Radios and spares chase the fleet across the Pacific like faithful dogs. The raid shows the nation its face. Ordinary people making the impossible work because they refuse to call it impossible. Doolittle thought he might be court-martialed if the raid failed. Instead, he earned the Medal of Honor and gave America proof that audacity is a weapon. That weapon doesn't retire after Tokyo. It takes a chair in CIC, hums on the mast, and whispers into pilot headsets at 0200. The ship that carried the impossible is now the ship that can see. The deck that launched bombers now launches ambushes, measured in seconds. And when those crews vanished into cloud, every sailor left on Hornet knew something permanent had shifted. Audacity had moved from rumor to standard operating procedure. A torpedo squadron veteran watches a Japanese night strike weave black water with eerie discipline in early 1942 and whispers the fear all felt. How do you beat pilots who own the dark? Carrier air groups of the Kido Butai drill for night takeoffs, tight torpedo tracks, and dives that hit like ghost knives. Rain and cloud are their allies. Our answer is a machine made of people. Hornets SC and CXAM rake the horizon. A fighter direction officer turns bearings into vectors. Radio discipline clips words to essentials range. Angels, cut. A seaman writes on scrap. See first, hit first. A private prayer that becomes policy. In the amber glow of Bakelite and tubes, the Combat Information Center learns to speak calm sentences that save minutes. Minutes become life. A captured American later writes from a cell, "Give us warning, and we will take the sky back." And in 1942, that warning begins to hum on every net. Interceptions start earlier, ship turns begin sooner, dive angles warp as F-4 Wildcats arrive from blind quarters at exactly the right height because a 19-year-old said so. How did they know? A shaken Japanese pilot asks a debrief officer who has no answer he trusts. The truth is simple and relentless. Build a fleet nervous system. Trust kids with switches. Iterate weekly. Training schools compress months into days. Westinghouse crates meet convoys. Procedures tighten until even fear has a checklist. The same calm that launched B-25 seconds now lives in headsets where nobody raises their voice. On the scope, smears become tracks, tracks become timing, and timing becomes an ambush writ large. A gun captain hears range true and watches tracers meet shapes he still cannot see. A signalman on the island feels the deck flex as turbines answer the bell and smiles because the turn came early, not late. The enemy's old math, surprise plus skill equals victory, no longer balances when surprise is gone. Night remains dark. It just stops being theirs. And once darkness no longer guarantees safety, the Pacific begins to change color, from fear to control, from reaction to initiative, from hoping to planning. Ask again how you beat the best night flyers on Earth. You build a nervous system and hand it to ordinary Americans who make extraordinary routine. Then you do it again next week, faster, with more sets, more radios, and more kids ready to say, Vector 310, Angels 1 to 2, without trembling. The lesson spreads ship to ship like a good rumor that happens to be true. Destroyer pickets extend the carrier's reach by miles. Cruisers with Mark 37 directors learn to take radar ranges as gospel. Pilots trust a voice they have never seen. A pencil line drawn 30 seconds sooner can turn a bomb into a splash and a torpedo into a white scar missed by inches. That is how you beat night flyers who think darkness is a weapon by taking the darkness away, one bearing at a time. Dawn breaks dirty on 26 October 1942. Rain shards, heavy sea, low cloud. Task Force 61 Hornet and Enterprise hunts and is hunted northeast of the Santa Cruz Islands. Inside Hornet's plot room, contacts bloom before topside can blink. Bogies 230, Angels 1 to 5 turn into the wind. Wildcats punch through squalls, while the first Japanese wave Val dive bombers and Kate torpedo planes, elite crews runs into a defense already moving. Radar-timed maneuvers spoil run-ins. Cap slashes formations at bearings that feel like fate. When bombs fall, many miss because the ship began to turn 30 seconds earlier on a call from a room the enemy cannot see. Battle is never clean. Hornet absorbs 3 bomb hits, at least 2 torpedoes, and 2 crashing aircraft that drive fire into steel. Hoses, hiss, paint blisters. Men haul lines until their hands bleed. Heavy cruiser Northampton takes a tow. The hawser thrums like a living thing, then parts with a shotgun crack. Destroyers come close aboard to pass hoses by hand, decks awash in foam and grit, sailors coughing through salt and smoke. Yet even bleeding, the system buys minutes enough to vector, enough to launch, enough to hit back. Enterprise's aviators maul Shokaku. Zuiho is damaged. Japanese strike groups stagger home short of leaders they cannot replace. A prisoner later murmurs, "They were waiting for us." And the line spreads like a shadow through ready rooms. Engine rooms fight to keep power. Damage control teams shore bulkheads with timber and prayer. The CIC keeps calling bearings as if time itself obeyed the headset. A gun director whispers, "Range true," and 5-inch bursts, "Stitch air," where a shape will be, not where it was. A rescue crew drags a wet, oil-blackened pilot over the lifeline, and he coughs once, laughs, and asks for coffee. Hornet will not survive the day. Scuttling charges, torpedoes, and enemy shells will end her hull that night. But before she goes under, her people turn training into time, and time into saved crews and shattered myths. The enemy came believing night and weather were allies. They leave knowing Americans can see through both. On 26 October, darkness stopped taking sides and started working for those with pencils, circuits, and nerve. The last message from the plot room is routine: a bearing, an angel number, a vector proof that even at the end, the system kept faith with its people. The sea keeps its secrets, but on this day, the math favored the patient and prepared. Begin in a New Jersey warehouse, stacked to the rafters with radar parts. Jump to a schoolhouse where sailors learn to read a trace in a week, then to a CIC where a teenager's pencil line changes a captain's rudder order. That's America's edge, speed of learning welded to speed of making. By late 1942, we bolt SC and CXAM air search to radios, Mark 37 fire control, 5-inch divided by 38 batteries, 40mm, Bofors, and flight deck tempo until information moves faster than metal. Detect far. Decide fast. Disrupt early. A cruiser fire controlman tapes a note, radar standby, range true, and watches bursts meet silhouettes his eyes can't see. Picket destroyers report bearings, carriers vector cap, ship's time turns to both launch fighters and ruin torpedo tracks. It looks like instinct. It's rehearsal, multiplied by logistics. Back home, Detroit stamps airframes. At Willow, runner B-24 rolls out every 63 minutes. RCA and Westinghouse ship, spare sets that chase the fleet like faithful dogs. Japanese air groups, brave and skilled, hit a defense that starts the fight miles earlier and steals the surprise from their lungs. Carefully planned dive angles warp under timed flak, and fighters arriving on schedule. That schedule was written with slide rules and etched into muscle memory on rolling decks. 2 ideas, 1 result. a system any kid can run and no enemy can ignore. Seconds become saved ships. Saved pilots become tomorrow's instructors. A destroyer captain, 26 and sleepless, throws his ship into an S-turn at 28 knots on faith, in a voice he has never seen. A line worker in Ohio writes her brother at sea, "Hold on your new set ships Tuesday," and means it. A gunnery officer remembers the first time a radar plot let him shoot where a plane would be, not where it was, and he grins in the dark. It takes humility to standardize excellence and courage to trust it under fire. America had both, plus factories that turned ideas into crates before the ink dried. The chain stretches beyond steel through doctrine memos, chalk talks on mess tables, and quick dusk drills, where mistakes become lessons. Pilots learn to trust vector calls. Captains learn to give rudder early. Gun crews learn that a quiet, range true, is the loudest sound in battle. Improvements are captured and shipped procedures in waxed canvas binders, so a kid in the Solomons benefits from a lesson learned off Iceland. An empire can centralize genius. A republic can distribute it to every deck, every watch, every scope. When the next raid forms beyond weather, the difference isn't gadget versus gadget, it's culture versus habit, and culture wins. By the time the enemy adjusts, the manuals are updated again, and pencils draw cleaner arcs on the plot. That is how seconds become victories, and victories become momentum that does not break. Early 1942 is a map of losses and a test of will. The answer is audacity you can measure with a ruler. 16B, 25B Mitchells lash to Hornet's deck at Alameda. Crews memorize short deck procedure. Sailors mark center lines in chalk and check tie-downs twice. On 18 April, a picket trawler ruins the plan. Captain Mark A. Mitcher orders launch anyway at roughly 650 nautical miles. Doolittle's lead ship rumbles, dips, then climbs tires, kissing air as spray whips past the bow and deck crews whoop in their throats. There is nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer, he says, and 80 volunteers prove it in smoke and wind. Targets include Tokyo, Nagoya, and Kobe. 15 crews press for China. 1 diverts to Vladivostok and is interned. 3 airmen die during the mission. 8 are captured. 3 executed. 1 dies of disease. The survivors return by grit, evasion, and luck. The tonnage is small. The message is continental. No sanctuary for aggressors. What matters for our story is the culture it cements. Inter-service trust. Precision timing. Calm under pressure. Deck crews who walked wingtip to wingtip with Army pilots carry that same spirit into the radar room. If America can make a land bomber fly from a carrier, America can make darkness obey our ships. Training compresses. Doctrine tightens. 19-year-olds learn to vector in rain at night because adults trust them with consequences. A controller's voice becomes a lighthouse in headsets. Vector 310. Angels 1 to 2. Now cut. Wildcats pivot as if the sky had hinges. Ships turn early instead of late. Gun teams time fuses to approach, not departure. Japanese planners who believed night was protection now face an enemy that treats rules as variables and problems as invitations. The raid that started as thunder over Tokyo keeps echoing in quiet rooms at sea, where pencils, tubes, and nerve make minutes out of darkness. Hornet becomes both symbol and system courage on the planks, science in the mast. When someone asks what changed between the rainy spring of 1942 and the brutal autumn battles, point here, to a nation that turned wonder into procedure, and to a ship whose deck once launched bombers and whose antennas now launch ambushes measured in clean American seconds. Back home, the echo becomes production. Factories answer with radios, spares, and planes stacked wingtip to wingtip. Training schools answer with syllabi boiled down to signal and decision. A machinist in Kansas City stamps a connector and jokes to her foreman, "Some kid at sea is waiting," and she's right. That kid will read a trace at 0200 that buys a pilot another day. The Japanese still fly bravely, still strike hard, but the old equation tilts. Surprise bleeds away, loss rates creep up, formations come home thin. America didn't just improvise. America industrialized improvisation, then handed it to teenagers who made it look easy. That is why the night begins to sound different, turbines rising, and a calm voice on the net saying, "We see them." A Michigan night watchman hears the floor siren at Willow Run and checks his wristwatch. Another B-24 Liberator rolls out. One bomber every 63 minutes. Steel, wiring, and American rhythm turned into flight. That pace is not a rumor. It's a blueprint for victory at sea. While the fleet learns to see in darkness, the homeland feeds the senses. RCA, Westinghouse, and Western Electric crate air search sets and spare parts. Schools teach sailors to read traces in a week. Replacement radios chase the carriers like faithful dogs. In 1943, the United States produces nearly 85,000 aircraft, part of more than 296,000, built from 1,945, and those numbers mean more cap over decks, more radar in pickets, more confidence in every CIC. A girl from Ohio tightens a connector on an SC transmitter and writes to her brother, "Hold on your new set ships Tuesday. Factory foremen hang charts where output lines climb, the victory flags." The Japanese are brave and gifted, but their industry can't replace elite crews fast enough. We can replace a whole radar room and 12 Wildcats between lunch and midnight. The F-4F's Pratt & Whitney snarls awake because a truck plant learned to machine cylinder heads faster. 5-inch divided by 38 mounts spit timed bursts because fuse shops stamp by the pallet. The proximity VT fuse arrives in the fleet, and anti-aircraft lethality jumps by a factor that feels like cheating about 5-fold, so bursts meet airplanes instead of empty air. A fighter director in a rolling CIC can be 19, because a stateside syllabus was boiled down to pure signal. When someone asks how America turned darkness into a home field, the answer starts with parts bins and ends with trust. Trust that the next crate arrives. Trust that the next pilot has a cockpit. Trust that if a set dies at sea, a better one rides the next convoy. "We never ran out of hope," a machinist says, wiping hands on a rag. "We ran out of shelves." The enemy sees the same story from far away. Every week, intercepts start earlier. Every month, flak is better timed. Every quarter, replacement pilots look younger and fly tighter. A Japanese radio man scrawls in his notebook after a failed night approach, "Their guns already knew we were there." When a nation manufactures minutes and hands them to teenagers with headsets, the sky slowly changes color, even after sunset. A destroyer helmsman squints through spray as the order snaps down the voice tube. Hard right stand by to turn into the wind. He trusts a voice he can't see, some kid buried in Hornet's Combat Information Center who just read a ghost on a green screen. That trust is our secret alloy. The carrier is the spear. The screen is the shield. Radar is the nerve that keeps both alive. Picket destroyers call bearings with SG surface search humming. Cruisers with Mach 37 directors and radar ranging lace the sky. 40mm Bofors thump, 20mm Oerlikons chatter, and the fighter director times a launch so tight the F4 seconds cross the bow. The instant the deck turns flat, it looks like instinct from afar. It's rehearsal underlined by electricity. At Santa Cruz, heavy cruiser Northampton tried to tow Hornet out, the hawser groaning like a wounded whale, while destroyers came alongside to pass hoses by hand, paint blistering, men coughing through salt and smoke. Even there, especially there, the shield kept working. Bearings from the scope-shaped flak patterns. Warnings opened narrow windows for rescue runs. Cap angles came faster than attackers expected. They were waiting for us, a shaken pilot told his deck gang, and the phrase echoed down ready rooms like a bad omen. The shield is more than guns. It's choreography. A destroyer captain throws his 1,500-ton ship into an S-turn at 28 knots on faith in a radar plot he'll never see. A fire controlman hears range true and squeezes. A signalman on a heaving carrier holds a final green flag, just long enough to send one more fighter into the pattern. The VT fuse bursts near metal, splinters smash, control runs, dive angles unravel. When people ask how America kept carriers alive in a sky full of killers, point here, to a network that makes courage efficient. The spear gets headlines. The shield gets results. Together they make a promise to every pilot strapping in under low clouds. The deck will be there when you come home. In that promise, the enemy hears the future, and it sounds like turbines rising as the deck straightens into the wind. A bosun's mate stands ankle-deep in oily water and tastes smoke while Hornet lists, power flickering, pumps hammering. Problem set up. Bombs have smashed decks, torpedoes have twisted steel, and 2 crashing planes have driven fire into the island. The ocean wants the ship, and the enemy wants the kill. The revelation is harder and bigger. Radar and training keep the fight organized anyway. Bearings still come, vectors still go, destroyers still here, hold 5 seconds more before they dart in to pluck men from the sea. A captured Japanese pilot, bandaged and shivering, whispers to his guard, "We thought you could not fight at night." And the guard shrugs. "We learned?" In the plot room, a teenager with graphite on his fingers keeps drawing lines because someone on the other end of the headset needs them. Up on the flight deck, a rescue crew hauls an oil-blackened aviator over the lifeline. He coughs once, smiles, and asks for coffee. Heavy cruiser Northampton strains on the tow. The cable sings. Then it parts like a rifle shot. Destroyers move in close, hull, to pass hoses by hand, decks awash in foam. Somebody starts a pump with a wrench and a prayer. Across the task force, Enterprise keeps launching and recovering under pressure, her air group mauling Shokaku and hurting Zuiho, proof that even as one ship dies, the system bleeds the enemy. The bosun's mate writes later, "She shook herself like a dog to throw off the fire." She cannot. As dusk deepens, scuttling charges and torpedoes end Hornet's agony. Men who loved her watch the sea take back the light. Yet the ledger leans our way. Irreplaceable enemy crews lost, flight decks damaged, a myth broken. The answer to the question is not sentimental. When a ship is dying, Americans turn minutes into salvation. Salvation for shipmates, for the mission, for the next battle already forming beyond the rain. The enemy learns a cruel truth. You can kill a ship and still lose the night. A supply officer in Pearl Harbor moves a grease pencil across a chalkboard. Aircraft in, aircraft out, ships in, ships out, pilots trained, pilots inbound. The numbers look unreal. During the war, America builds 2,710 Liberty ships, and one of them, the SS Robert E. Peary, is assembled in 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes. The Navy and Maritime Commission flood the ocean with hulls. Over 100 escort carriers steam out to widen the radar umbrella. By war's end, the Allies have built 122 CVEs, most of them American. Aircraft, more than 296,000 from 1,945. Over 15,000 P-51 seconds. 3,970 B-29 seconds. B-24 seconds in such quantity that Willow Run's clock looks like a dare. Aircrew. The Army Air Forces train well over 100,000 pilots, and many times that in navigators, bombardiers, and gunners. Inside the fleet, statistics turn into timing. Radar pickets push contact ranges outward. VT-fused barrages chew formations into fragments. Fighter direction slashes approach, corridors thin as knife edges. On bad nights, the deck is still there at daybreak. On good nights, the enemy never reaches weapon release. At sea, the Mark 37 director tied to radar ranging rewrites flak geometry. Ashore, the B-29 seconds open, a second truth that industrial scale can touch an enemy heartland from oceans away. We are going to win this war with arithmetic, a US officer tells a reporter, and for once, a cliché is true. The enemy adjusts tactics, lowers altitudes, splits formations, shifts to dusk attacks. The math adjusts faster. A Japanese diary line feels like a verdict. We cannot replace men so quickly as they. Somewhere in a Kansas City plant, a woman stamps a connector and says, "Ship it," and that simple verb becomes strategy. The miracle is not that America has numbers, it is that America turns numbers into minutes, and minutes into lives, and lives into pilots who return to fight tomorrow. In that conversion, the enemy hears inevitability. What began as SC and CXAM on a few flat tops becomes a fleet-wide nervous system. Newer air search sets sprout on masts, SG sets sweep the sea surface, fighter control talkers learn a common cadence. Night-capable fighters join the dance F6, F5 Newtons, Hellcats and F4, U-2, Corsairs, carrying airborne radar that lets one pilot and one operator turn darkness into hunting ground. Escort carriers 122 by Allied count, mostly American stretch, the shield across convoys and amphibious lanes. Destroyer escorts learn to fight by the book with radar bearings and sonar ranges that rhyme. The lesson that Hornet paid for spreads like doctrine should. Fast. A night fighter pilot scribbles after his first radar kill. I never saw him until the last second, only the scope, and the words feel like science fiction turned into muscle memory. In the Marianas, radar-directed cap and disciplined controllers help trigger a day so lopsided sailors nickname it the turkey shoot. And while headlines love bravado, the truth under it is process search, sort, vector, intercept done at scale. On picket stations, destroyers take the first punches, call the bearings, and buy the fleet time. On big deck carriers, flight decks cycle like factories, minutes shaved with practice until launches feel like drum beats. The Japanese remain brave, skilled, determined. They simply run out of ways to make night their ally. When an empire centralizes genius, it survives on a few great men. When a republic standardizes excellence, it thrives on a million competent ones. That is what the ocean learns by 1944-45. A controller in a steel cube, a gunner behind a shield, a pilot in a blacked-out cockpit reading a glowing scope. Each small act adds to a system no one else on Earth can duplicate at that speed. An empire can build a sword. America builds a workshop and teaches teenagers to use every tool in it. And the ocean, which loves no flag, starts yielding to the flag that makes the best use of time. Here is the last question. Asked in a whisper on a wet deck, could any nation really transform night, weather, and distance into advantages fast enough to beat a seasoned foe? The answer is yes, and we proved it with ships that saw before eyes could see, with pilots who trusted a stranger's calm vector, with factories that turned aluminum and copper into minutes. The payoff sounded impossible until it happened. Radar-directed cap, slashing formations apart. VT-fused curtains shredding dives. Pickets buying time measured in lives. Escort carriers laying airfields across oceans. 29 seconds. Climbing into the jet black over the Marianas to reach an enemy heartland from islands we seized with that same nervous system. A Japanese POW told his American interrogator, "We did not believe you could find us in the night." And the interrogator handed him a cigarette and said, "We didn't until we taught ourselves." That line is our war in 10 words. Teach ourselves, then teach each other. Then scale it until the ocean has a rhythm, and that rhythm is American. Statistics that once sounded boastful became ordinary. 2,710 Liberty ships built. A Liberty assembled in 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes. 122 escort carriers in Allied service, most from American yards. More than 296,000 aircraft produced. Over 15,000 P-51 seconds. 3,970 29 seconds. A proximity fuse that multiplied anti-aircraft lethality, a training system that made 19-year-olds fluent in the language of electrons. None of those numbers fights alone. They join hands in the dark. A controller's whisper becomes a pilot's turn, becomes a gunner's burst, becomes a formation that falls apart, becomes a task force that survives the night to own the day. The miracle is human, not mechanical. It is the way a free country lets a kid with a headset decide a ship's fate and then backs him with a factory, a manual, and a nation of people who think problems exist to be solved. When Hornet went down at Santa Cruz, the message wasn't despair. It was instruction. Build faster. Train harder. See sooner. Move first. By war's end, the old promise of night to the attacker had been reversed. The dark was no longer a cloak for our enemies. It was ground we took and held, quietly, with circuits and courage, and it stayed ours because we earned it together.